All right. Well, hi, everyone. Glad to see you. Glad everyone is here. So, as we all know, the events in the world have been pretty crazy lately and very tragic and quite worrying. And so we learn in our studies of mystical truths that prayer is real and that prayer works. And so we want to look at ways in which our prayers can be effective and first of all, really to determine exactly what it is we're praying for. And that's always the one of the most powerful parts of prayer is clarifying what you want. And so in the case of world peace, we want to have a good sense of what that looks like, right? We don't want to, for instance, I'm sure right now a lot of people are praying for one side over the other. Let us win. They're praying for victory. They're praying for justice. They're praying for all kinds of things. And that's understandable, but we want to take the higher ground, namely because we don't know what justice looks like. Not really. I mean, we know the immediate things that we don't want to see happening. But to be most effective, we want to go as far up the causal chain as possible, meaning what's really causing these problems. And it's an interesting thing about prayer in that the closer you get to the root cause of a problem, the more powerful your prayer is. It has a greater effect because the closer you get to the actual cause, the more power there is. So the more power there's available to you because it hasn't been diffused. If you looked at it like an organizational tree, you have the cause up here, and then you have all the ways that cause works its way down into the particulars of everyday life. So we want to get clear about that, and especially we don't really know what that primary cause is. I mean, we can speculate, we can say maybe fear, right? Maybe that might be the root cause of all the world's problems, but we don't really know. So what we want to do is we want to leave that part up to God. It's kind of like when you do a download for your computer, an upgrade to your operating system. They might tell you, okay, well, we're going to fix this bug, or we're going to, add in this other little feature. But unless you're a computer tech, you don't know really what those things are, not under the hood are. So it's the same in prayer. When we lift up our hearts and our minds to God, and we say, look, you know what's needed. You know, absolutely everything is visible at that level of consciousness, and all the imbalances are immediately evident. So we leave that up to God, and we say, just this is where the prayer, thy will be done, comes in. But the interesting part is that we are asking the prayer. So it's going to come through our filter anyway. And so we have to, it's a blend, in other words. We ask for God's will to be done, but we're also saying that does not include wiping us out and starting over. God, you say, look, God, we want you to fix this, but that does not include just another flood or some kind of whatever else you have up your sleeve, right? So prayer is always, I get in a lot of trouble for saying this, but prayer is, there's a lot of negotiation in prayer. And that's the way God wants it, you see, because one of the primary ways we grow spiritually is figuring out what the hell it is we want. Right? I mean, part of growing spiritually is becoming self-aware. And at the very root of our self-awareness is God, because that's the very root of our being. So part of prayer is a negotiation, and it and we were talking about self-awareness and spiritual development. So part of that is getting to know what it is you actually want, because when you do that, when you go within and you really see it, and that's part of the real useful aspect of prayer, because if you pray for something, automatically everything starts to get into motion to bring that into reality, into your life. And so it's going to start showing up in ways that might not be a good fit for you, something that you're not willing to accept. So then you make a course correction. You might pray for a new house, speaking of something mundane. You might want a new house, but you pray for it, and then you realize, oh, that means I've got to sell the one I'm in. And then you look around and you think, geez, I'm kind of attached to this place. And so that gets in the way. So that introduces a conflict, right? An inner conflict. And the interesting thing is that a lot of the times, if not most of the time, that conflict goes undetected. And so then we wonder why our prayers don't get answered, or we wonder why they're getting answered in the way they are. And it's simply because we lack self-awareness. We're not going in and figuring out where the conflicts are. And if we know anything, from history and our own personal history, is that the people who really seem to go the farthest in life and really have like a fully present and powerful presence, you might say, are those who seem to have an unconflicted mind. Mormons are like that. You ever notice? I mean, they're always bright. They look healthy. They have their organizational management, their community management really under good control. I don't know if you've ever been to Utah, but the place sparkles. Everybody's happy. They look good. It's because they have an unconflicted mind, and that unconflicted mind is located in a large community. You see, this is one criticism people have of cults, is because we'll look at all these people, they're too happy, or they all look like they came out of the same cookie cutter. And in a sense they do, because they are participating in a unified, unconflicted mental construct, right? So houses are constructs. We build houses for very specific reasons. So, to protect us from the elements and to give us something to, to feel at home in, and to locate ourselves, and to have some, not only physical security, but mental and emotional security. So I'm not saying that these larger constructs aren't good, because they can be very good until you outgrow them, right? So whether the cult has a kind of a overall positive, happy feeling to it, or if it's dark, none of that, all of that's just indicative that they're participating in a unified mind. So in prayer, that's what we want to do. We want to build a house in mind. We want to build a house that has logical coherence. It is unconflicted. There are no conflicting desires or conflicting ideas, and there's no fear. fear of losing out or missing out on something. So now we find ourselves in a place where the world's getting to be dangerous. What can we do? And so we have to get really clear. And here's what usually happens, and this happens like if you are about to get in a car accident, there's a moment of where you freeze. And in that moment of freezing up, in other words, something's developing right in front of you, and you freeze because you don't know what to do, or it shocks you, and in that moment of shock, you're just frozen. And so there's this attitude, this creeping attitude of fate and resignation. And you think, well, I guess that's just what's going to happen. You just kind of resign to the situation and then think, this is completely out of my control. That's not true. It's never true right up until the very last second, you see, and then everything changes. But so we want to develop an inner strength and an inner purpose. Strength and purpose go together. If you have a real unconflicted purpose, then you're just automatically strong spiritually. And so our purpose, number one, is just to survive, right? We want to survive. And not only just survive, because, survival can be brutal. We want to thrive. And we want life to go on in a positive, constructive, creative way. We want to live our lives in such a way that we're able to withstand the ups and downs, that no matter what happens, what kind of tragedy we experience in our lives, we want to be able to weather that, because there's something larger than us personally that we look to that gives our life meaning. So this is very important when it comes to prayer. You have to have a purpose, and that purpose has to be non-negotiable. In other words, once you figure out what your life is about, and you kind of, you build yourself a platform and say, this is like in politics, right? They talk about having a platform. Well, you have your own personal platform, and it is your purpose, and that's non-negotiable. That's where you have to have complete and utter integrity, knowing that this is what you stand for, and this is what you stand upon. That's why they call it a platform, what you stand for. So when things start getting hairy and dangerous, then that can shake the platform. That can cause you to doubt your purpose, or to think that your purpose is now being overwhelmed by a larger purpose, one over which you have no control whatsoever. It's reasonable to think that, but still it's not true. Each person, the way we're created is we are created as individuals, and we have the ability to create our own platform. If we don't create our own platform, then we just climb on somebody else's. But the opportunity for spiritual growth, and what does growth imply? Growth implies, you're born, you grow, and then you move into maturity, right? So what we're talking about here really is spiritual maturity. We want to be spiritually mature, meaning we want to be independent. We want to be spiritually independent. We want our purpose to be our purpose, not the purpose of a larger group, because that's like trying to create something by a committee, right? Every time you try to do that, then everything gets watered down, therefore it gets weaker, less strong in the mind of God in the way in its creative potential, right? So we have to be very clear about our purpose and stand on it like it's our platform, and not compromise about that. Unless, of course, we learn something, and in our, self-reflection, self-awareness, we realize we have to shift something, but not greatly. You see, everything has to go towards really figuring out who and what you are about, right? Who you are and what you're about. And so you want to make sure that that is rooted in the sacred. You want to make sure that it's the basic things, like it's ethical and it's moral. And now here's where the paradox comes in, because even though we're individuals, and this is where the beauty comes in too, even though we're individuals, we are all connected. We are all connected with each other. This is what's in Hinduism is called Indra's net. And it's where you have a net, and at each tie-off point in the net, there's a jewel. And that jewel is your soul, each individual soul. This is the whole basis of individuality, is that we are created as an individual soul, and each individual soul is a jewel in Indra's net. And so you can imagine how big the net is, right? So what you do, and this is the paradox, the more individual you become, the more powerful a member of the group you become, because your level of influence goes way up, because you're standing on your platform. You know what you're about. You see? So as you are clear in yourself, it's like that jewel is becoming brighter, clear. There's greater clarity, and the light that shines through it starts to light up all the other jewels. It's like, rising tide raises all boats. It's very true in this. So the thing that we really that we want to just be mindful of is that the light that lights up these jewels is one light. See, all the jewels are, it's like they're reflecting the one light. Excuse me, I've got to do something here. All right. So that's the nature of Indra's net, that the one light that's lighting up all of the jewels is the one light. That's God. So that's our connecting link. That's what makes us all one. That's what makes us one. And our individuality then becomes like a note in a symphony. And when all the notes in a symphony are really perfect, then the symphony is really great. It sounds great. And it raises us, it lifts us. So all of this to say that it's really important that you know what you want, and that it's based in something real, and that reality is your platform. It's what you stand for, what's at the core of your being, what is the most important thing to you, and that's worth giving a lot of time to figuring out and to test. It's always you use that to test, and the best way to do that is when things happen in the world that seem threatening and dangerous. You want to check and see how that impacts you and what part of your platform it's disturbing. What is it about what's happening that is bothering you? And you want to get clear about that. So there are several things that we can do. And prayer, we know that prayer is amplified when we apply a ritual to it. And what is a ritual? A ritual is something we do physically that symbolizes the thing that we're praying for. So like if we want to experience spiritual transformation, we can take something and lift it up, lift it up and pray to God saying, change this. This is what a priest does in the Mass, taking these elements, lifting them up and say, change this. And those elements symbolize parts of ourselves, parts of us, both individually and collectively. So what I like to do is you either get a globe of the earth, something that's about this big, about 6-7 inches in diameter. And if you don't have one, just visualize it. And you put your hands around it like this, and you charge your whole body with chi, or with vital energy. And you do that through breathing and through centering and drawing from deep within you. And it as it comes from deep within you, it becomes more and more tangible energy. You bring it into your hands and your fingertips, and you surround this little globe with it, and you charge it with the life energy that is infused with the light. And this is where it's like, God's will be done, but it's coming from your particularized vantage point of, I'm a human being. I want this place, this whole earth, to be a habitable, to be a habitat for humanity that is sustainable and good for everyone. You see, we don't want to bless it in such a way that it's going to force part of that humanity off the planet, right? Just because it's, what we want doesn't include them. So we have to be very careful that when we pray for the world, if we pray for world peace, that it's good for everyone, because you can't get rid of people, right? I mean, you can kill them, but their souls are still here, and they're going to be coming back. So genocide doesn't really work, because those souls are going to come back, and then it'll just compound. The problems will get worse and worse. And we see evidence of that all the time. So we have to adjust our spiritual orientation to where we want the best for everyone, even those sons of bitches we don't like, right? Even those people who, for all intents and purposes, are diametrically opposed to us. In other words, our enemies. People who do absolutely horrendous things. That doesn't matter, because we don't know how they're working their stuff out, right? We don't know where they are on their evolutionary path. We know that we all have to work together, but we also know that there's going to be friction points, and that there's going to be a process of figuring that out. So in our prayer work, we want to be very careful to include everyone, the best thing for everyone, both individually and collectively. The largest collective, of course, being the whole world, which includes the biosphere. So as we pray for the best for everyone, we're praying for the best for the earth. And that's, though we may argue about that, that's not really a question. I mean, if it were reduced to a query in an artificial intelligence supercomputer, it would come up with a very definite answer. This is what you need to do. This is what needs to happen. We don't have that yet, but God is that all the time. So we default to that. That's why, Christians and spiritual people say, thy will be done, because that's the will we're referring to. It's how can this whole system come into balance, and in such a way that it increases the viability for everyone, increases happiness, increases more than happiness. Happiness is ephemeral, it comes and goes. But what increases the life spirit in people to such a degree that they feel that life is worth living and worth trying for, And that brings up a desire to make things better, to continually make things better, to be creative in our approach to the world, so that when problems arise, which they always do, because there's one thing about this place that we live in, it is cyclical. It goes around and around. It gets better and it gets worse, gets better and it gets worse. And it's even reflected in the seasons. Some parts of the year are really nice and other parts are really hard. So, but it's through that oscillation that growth is made possible. So it's more important now than, I'm speculating about this, but what I get from within is that it's now or never. I mean, we're at a crossroads that is unprecedented in world history. We have to, this is the time for all of us with any spiritual awareness at all. It's time for us to stand on our platform and put our foot down and say, we see these scenarios arising and developing and the fears that people have and everything they're imagining. And we have to say, absolutely not. This is not going to happen. Not on my watch. As long as I'm here, that's not going to happen. Sounds grandiose, right? Sounds like something an egomaniac would say. But in the world of prayer, that's the kind of intention you have to bring to it. This is the part where, you negotiate with God and say, God, I know the place is really screwed up, and but we're not leaving. You're not going to push us off this planet. No matter how much of a mess we're making of it, we're gonna work this out. So because there's part of the divine mind that's going to say, well, if they don't care, why should I care? Right? It's like if you're working with somebody, you're raising a kid. If they don't care, then there's a deeper problem, right? So we have to, both individually and collectively, we have to really get clear that we care about what happens. And there are some things that we will accept and other things that we will not accept. So, and that's really what prayer is what you will accept. So get real clear about that. What will you accept and what won't you accept? There's an interesting thing that happens to me is sometimes I'll get in my car, go to the store, or go on a trip or something, and I have this nagging feeling, geez, I feel like I could get in an accident. And, there's this background anxiety. I don't usually feel anxious when I get in my car, but, there's a lot of good reasons to feel anxious, but it's almost like something is fated to happen, and here's this thing that happens in the human mind. Something is fated to happen. And so I take a moment, I just take a deep breath and I say, absolutely not. That ain't happening. I'm not going to get in an accident. I don't accept that. I do not accept that. I do a reset, right? I push the reset button and I purge that feeling of that background anxiety of this fear, this fated notion that has drifted into my mind. And I get rid of it. Say, no, that's not going to happen. And therefore, what all of the patterns that then would radiate out from me as I enter into the network of traffic, which is like a living organism. Traffic has its own pattern. And so there's a mind in it, and there might be tension in that mind that then translates to me because, we're connected. We're always connected with everyone. So that thought comes in, and if I accept that thought, then my chances of getting into an accident are shoot through the roof. It's very likely that it would happen. But because we live in that paradox of being an individual and a collective, then the responsibility immediately falls on us to say, no, I don't accept that. That's not going to happen. And if you're really clear about that, then your word, see, that's your word, because you're a yes or you're a no. And if you say no and you really mean it, and you've got your platform well established and you're strong in it, then that no is going to resound and go throughout the whole network and can change the whole network. And you understand what I mean by network, right? That's the mass mind. It's the way minds interact. And it's like a computer, you know, everything is working together. Something changes over here, this part of the equation over here has to change to match it. You see? So, but if you're spiritually aware, spiritually mature, then you figure out that you are a cause in that network. You're not just at the effect of it. You're not along for the ride. You're one of the drivers. You see? So what you determine within yourself, and I mean really solidly determine, like this is who and what I am. This is what I stand for. And this is the vision that I hold for the world and for myself. So the clearer I get about that, and the truer I am to it, you know, in other words, how much spiritual integrity I have, and I'm not easily swayed by any influences in the mass mind that blow past me. You know, if I'm really solid in my own, on my own platform, in my own purpose, then my word really matters. It really, really has a powerful effect. And, you know, you, in your spiritual life, you can be a church goer, you know, because people go to church for community, they like the group worship, and there's some churches have, you know, this great symbolic presence, and so it draws you in and up, helps you in your worship. But mystics aren't churchgoers. If you want to be a mystic, you have to be spiritually independent. You have to be one of the drivers. You have to be one of the voices in the network, so that when you say yes or no, that has a resounding effect. And then you actually either contribute to this, or you know, it's like I say, you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. If you're just going along for the ride, you are definitely part of the problem, because the ride always tends down. It always tends down because it's based on the intellectual instinctual part of us, which is always fearful, which is always looking for threat. You know, in cognitive science now, they're saying that the brain is wired for threat overwhelmingly more than it's wired for looking for opportunity. You know, and that's, I think in psychology, that's called neuroticism, or negative emotion. So we're really prone to negative emotion, and there's good reason for that, because, you know, if you imagine you're a primitive human being and you're walking through the forest, and there's this wonderful bush full of berries on the one side of the trail, and on the other side of the trail there's a tiger. Now, where are you going to put your attention? Here, the bush full of berries is a wonderful opportunity, but unless you give greater weight to the actual threat, you're never going to eat the berries, right? The tiger's going to eat you. So that's why our brains are wired in that way. We are really constantly on alert for the threats. And if you know that about people, then you can make a lot of money off of them, because all you have to do is manage their perception of threat. Right? This is, newspapers used to know this, and now media knows it. If it bleeds, it leads. And the more it leads, the more attention you get, the more clicks you get, the more newspapers you sell. So that's kind of a feature of the collective that we live in, is that it's largely driven by this intellectual, instinctual nature of the human body, which is our vehicle, but it's not the driver. You see, our cars have features. but we're driving the car. A mystic is a person who says, I'm driving this car, whether it's your body or whether it's the greater collective, the mass mind that you live in. I'm one of the drivers. You see, so you get really clear about that. And then what you say yes to, the doors are open. What you say no to, the doors are closed. Now, it's not like one individual person is going to be, in control of the whole mass mind. No, we work in groups. But, if I think Confucius said, you don't get rid of darkness in a room by trying to sweep it out. You don't try to sweep out darkness. You light a candle. And so we have to understand that one tiny flame has an exponential effect on darkness. So even though you're just one tiny jewel in Indra's net, when you speak your word in a positive, constructive, life-affirming way, that's like lighting a match in a dark room. All of a sudden, you see the whole room. That one match affects everything in an exponential way. In other words, light is way more powerful than dark. So you want to be a light in the world, and then it doesn't take so many people, right? I mean, it's no longer a matter of the majority. No, you can, with a very small group of people, relatively speaking to the total population of the planet, a very small group of people can have an enormous, outsized effect on the whole system if they act in a coordinated manner. And the best way to coordinate people with that level of consciousness is to identify as high up as possible the highest purpose, which is viability, right? It's just simply viability and sustainability. That we live in an environment, in a social construction. We're living together. We want to live together. So the highest purpose in all of that is viability. Can it survive? And will it thrive? And will it do so for everyone? Every single person on the planet has to be included in that. Because to exclude one person or one group of people, to exclude that, darkens that whole part of the mind. That's darkness. Because you're working against something that's not, that we didn't create the population, right? I mean, we didn't create the existence of humanity on this planet. We're here because something greater, something larger put us here, in whichever way you want to, speculate about that. We didn't create ourselves, in other words. We are created beings. So when we realize that, we know, even that we can't identify what the specific highest causal part of this whole thing is, we know that it exists. And that's all we need to know. We can just open up to it and say, whatever you got, that's what I want. Because you're going to the most high, and you draw from that unknown realm, that unseen realm, in down through you into you, and then that becomes your word. So this is, in all of this to say, this is not an intellectual exercise. You can't figure this out. This is a spiritual exercise. This is a qualitative entity. It's not an idea. You see, it is an idea, but it's way beyond what we're able to formulate. So it's a spiritual reality that we're bringing in, and we can open up to that and be a conduit for it. And we can stand on the platform and insist that whatever that is, because we know it's good. In Genesis said, God created everything, and then he said, hey, this is really good. So we know it's good. We know it's creative. That's the Spirit. That's the Holy Spirit, like the way, in Christianity. That's the Spirit. That's God's personality. God's personality is such that it's creative. It wants to be here. It wants to be alive. It wants to connect. The Holy Spirit wants to connect with you, with me, with everyone. That's the Spirit of God. The whole Spirit is one of connection, one of viability, one of creativity. You know, I mean, God doesn't know what's going to happen here. That's up to us. I mean, he set it up so that if we get clear about it, then we can continue to grow and to thrive and to be in, you know, greater and greater viability. But that's all up to us. And if we don't do it, then this beautiful place we have is just going to collapse under its own weight, not because God is punishing us, you know, like with a flood or rain of fire, you know, all of that stuff. Those are just imaginative metaphors. But those are very real consequences, you see, if we fail to get clear about, number one, wanting to survive, wanting to thrive, and wanting to do it in such a way that everyone else can survive and thrive as well. And then we're in alignment with God because we're in alignment with God's personality. What God wants, we want. You see? And then it becomes very, very powerful. So if you take a globe, you know, a small globe like that, and you have to do a trick in the mind. You know, those little globes, you set them on your mantle or on the coffee table. It's like, you know, they're just made out of paper or metal or whatever. You know, it's just an object, but it's a symbol. You see, here's the difference. It's an object, but it's also a symbol. It means something, but it doesn't just mean something because it's a representation of the actual planet. It has a connection with the greater planet, with the actual real planet, because of its shape and the intention that went into it to make it such. There's a connection, not physically, but in the domain of mind, the universal mind. So it's such a connection that you can actually make it the actual Earth. In mind, you can hold this thing and say, and then actually experience what it would be like to be a huge giant person and actually put your hands around the Earth itself and bless it. And all that. So when you're holding this Earth, you feel the water of the oceans. You sense the atmosphere and the clouds in the sky, and that they're moving. And you feel the way the you know, the land masses are kind of in a jigsaw puzzle arrangement, and that they move over great periods of time. And then, but especially you become aware of all the people on this globe that you're visualizing in your hands. All of those people, and you yourself are there. It's like those pictures, you know, they show of the Earth from outer space, you know, taken from the moon or someplace. And then they'll draw an arrow pointing to it and say, you are here. You have to, the Earth that you hold, the Earth that you hold has to be like that. You're holding not only yourself, but all the people who are alive on the planet. So in your visualization, you want to make this thing alive, and you connect with it, and you connect with it in the largest and most intimate and most real way that you can muster. And as you do so, that creates a connection, because in God there is no size. There's Ralph Waldo Emerson said, there is no great and no small to the mind that maketh all. The size is not an issue. I think also in A Course in Miracles, it says there is no degree of difficulty in the mind of God, something like that. In other words, it says whether you want a small miracle or a huge miracle, to God it's the same, because there's no difference in magnitude. So we have to if we're going to be in alignment with God and take on God's personality, which is the Holy Spirit, and you have to push past the religious connotations of that, because what they're talking about are real things. They've become inured to the actual meaning of these things. If you can encompass the reality of this fact, this spiritual fact, that there is no difference in orders of magnitude, that regardless of what you pray for, whether, regardless, whatever it is, big or small, it's the same to God. So the more you get that into you, then you're negating all of this instinctual, intellectual belief system that says, if something's really big, it's harder to get, which is a lie. It's simply a lie. There is no difference in degree, in size. That's why some people are able to create, incredible things. And we say, well, how could they possibly do that? Well, what they've done is they have overcome that belief in themselves. So they believe that if they can envision it, they can do it. So you have to get into that same mindset. If I can envision it, I can do it. So, and that's different, right? Because it's so many times we're tempted to think this is just all too much. These wars, these conflict zones in the world right now, what can I do about it? I'm just one person. That's what the instinctual, intellectual part of our being tells us. But we're not instinctual, intellectual beings. We're spiritual beings living in an instinctual, intellectual vehicle. This is the Star of David. This is the upright triangle and the inverted triangle interlaced. That's the paradox. We're both in an animal body and we are infinite spirit. So we're infinite potential operating in a field of limitation. Which one do you think is going to win out? The way you answer that question determines how effective you are as a spiritual being living in a material world. Because you have to accept and really bring into your being, all the way down into yourselves, that the good, the true, and the beautiful are going to win out. You see, that's what you stand for. That's being a mystic. And that's how, as a mystic, you pray for change in the world. So just briefly, just because this is always, a big part of it, we have to address this thing called change. And what prayer is. The world is always changing. This is like that metaphor, that story where you can't step in the same river twice. The river of the world is constantly flowing, constantly changing. It's the world, the earth is constantly rotating on its axis. We're constantly, revolving around the sun. We're constantly exposed to different astrological and cosmological forces. Those things are always changing. So to create change, you can't just stop the whole system and say, okay, now I'm going to think up a new system. No, that's not up to you. It's not up to any of us. So what we have to do is we have to work with the system that's already in place. And part of that system is that it's flowing. It's constantly flowing. So if we were like say we live in Samaria thousands and thousands of years ago, and we're starting to figure out it's better to stay in one place and to grow crops, but crops need water, and the river, is running by, and it's fuller at some times of the year and than in others, and so we don't want to be restricted to the river, what it can do. So we figure out, all right, let's create these channels, these aqueducts off of the river, and bring some of that water over to the field, or into a cistern. And so that when the river gets drier, then we have water, you see. So what we're doing is we're interacting with a system that's constantly changing, but we're using that change. We're redirecting. See, life is going this way. So prayer is just making these little course changes, taking what's already in existence and using those forces in ways that work for us. Another good example is like you're living on a farm, you have a barn, and 10 years ago, lightning struck your barn and it burned it down, so you had to rebuild it. And you think, well, that sucks, and what am I just, at the mercy of the elements? Is there nothing I can do about this? So we figure out that if we put a metal rod up on top of the barn and we connect that rod by a wire to a copper post that we drive into the ground, that when lightning strikes the barn, it's going to strike that rod, and all of that energy is going to go down to ground, and the barn is left unscathed. You see? That's taking an already existing dynamic and using it. See, we're just rearranging it. We're just, that's how prayer works. That's what we do when we pray. We take something that's already in motion and we start to direct it by degree where we want it to go. It's very much like training an animal. So we practice that. And as we do that, like in the example of the barn and the lightning rod, we can figure, all right, if we take that wire that's going just right down into the ground, if we take that wire and put it into the well where we draw our water up out of the ground, that it cleans the water. Every time the lightning strikes, it kills all the germs in the water. So there we've taken it even in a farther step, right? That, what I just described, that's like science in a nutshell. That's how, and science is doing, we want to make our prayer scientific in that we want to think it through. We want to identify those existing forces and circumstances in our lives, and then figure out what we need to do to change it by degree to go in the direction that we want it to go. So in these greater geopolitical things that are going on, which are absolutely bizarre, we know that we're not being told the whole story. We know that there are larger forces at work that kind of orchestrate things for purposes we have no idea. So if our spiritual platform shoots above that in such a way that we do not allow those elements in the mind, those minds within the mind, to run everything. You see, it's part of being a mystic is that you are a driver, you're not just a passenger. So you go above that level. You go above the heads of everybody. And you say, this world will be viable. It will be sustainable for everyone. Nobody gets to kick anybody else off the planet. See, it's got to work for everyone. That's what we stand on. So if you've got a contingency in the mass mind that wants things to go its own way, and it doesn't matter who it has to hurt in order to get their goals accomplished, that's not consistent with the personality of God. That's not consistent with the reality of connection, of viability and sustainability for everyone. So these are some of the things I wanted to talk to you about today, to get you to really get clear within yourself. Number one, the ability you have to change things in the world. And number two, the absolute clarity and rigor that you approach your own inner understanding, your own self-awareness. What do I really want? You know, am I just getting tired and I just want to check out? You know, that's a very real force. A lot of people have it. They've resigned. They're just totally resigned, and they just soon just die, and so they don't have to deal with all this anymore. A lot of people are coming to that crossroads. So those people might say, sure, whatever, you know, end it all. I don't care. I'm tired of this stuff. Don't go there. Don't go there. You go there even a little bit, and that adds weight to that already ponderous presence in the mind that's just simply not only tired with life, but they're getting disgusted with life. In other words, they see all these horrible things happening, and then they get angry at God and say, why are you letting this happen? And God's looking down and saying, why are you letting it happen? You know, I set this place up so that you could grow and thrive and learn and be creative, so that I can take joy in what you create, and we can work together and make this something that neither you nor I, this is God talking, neither you nor I can even envision, because you're creating something new, and that's why I created you, so that you could create something new and marvelous and wonderful. That's the personality of God. It's explorative, it's creative, it wants to know, it wants to connect. So don't get sucked into these nihilistic thought patterns of resignation and even resentment. You know, a lot of people get resentful towards God because God lets all this happen. You know, that's insane. That's insanity and a complete misunderstanding of what this is all about. So don't join that camp. Don't get resigned. Don't give up. See, don't give up. You have to take your position. You have to get clear in yourself, build your platform, know what you're about, and then stand on it and insist on it. Don't take no for an answer. Okay. So let's talk about it. What does this bring up for you? You unmute yourself, and what feelings arise? How does this make you, what reactions do you get? Remember, you're muted, and if you want to say something, unmute yourself.
Yeah, Michael, I'll start.
Yeah.
Really well, certainly timing for this conversation with me is perfect. What I got out of it, what was very helpful is the concept, thinking about the concept of getting to the highest causal part of change. And I do read journalism frequently, watch free press. Read it by George Will yesterday, an opinion on desperate state our country is with, you know, the dysfunction of our political class and the problems facing this country. It was discouraging, but what helped me today was, I don't know if the dissolution of our country is necessarily bad for everybody in the world. So, so getting higher and what's best for everybody, and I don't know what that's going to look like for any country, or really for the world. But if I can focus on that, that changes things. And it happened just here this morning that you're talking. You know, and when you started talking, you said, we're all gems in Indra's net. We're all individuals, and I started to wonder, would each of us in this little group, who have a sense of our God self, could we agree what's best for our country or the world right now? But I think we could, if we talked about it and got to this highest point on the change. That's what comes up for me. Right?
Yeah. I have a couple of friends that we work together. We meet like 4 times a week via Zoom or on the telephone, and we're studying Hermeticism. And one of the part of Hermeticism is working with the 4 elements, fire, air, water, and earth, and understanding what those are really about. It blows my mind. The deeper I go into it, the more it's profound. So one of the things that we're doing is using the element of water. Water, the characteristic of the element of water is that it cools because of evaporation. It cools and it mixes. So the forces in nature that do that are ascribed to the element of water. That the element of water is operative in those parts of nature. So we we're visualizing the emotional temperature of the planet right now being cooled. You see, if you have 2 brain cells that are connected, that would be a good thing. I don't think anybody could find a flaw in that. Just let's cool things down, right? So that because the less emotionally reactive everyone is, the clearer they're able to think, and then that will facilitate problem solving. You see, so cool it down. Everybody just cool down, and through visualization and actually connecting with and working with the element of water, it's amazing. You can see it and feel it happen. So that's one thing you could stand for, right? That stand upon, that could be part of your platform, is that we want to feel, we want to be alive, and we want to have emotions. We can't get rid of emotions, nor would we want to, because emotions make life wonderful, or they can make life hell too. So we want, when they get reactive and when they get overheated, so it's like, don't let your emotions get overheated. Cool it down, and accept that for the whole planet. Accept that as you cool your own emotions, then everybody's emotional volatility starts to subside. And then people can say, okay, let's think this through. Let's solve this problem, instead of let's just hit them back, because they're so horrible. They're so evil. They're all this, all that. We cool it down, and that gives us increasingly greater perspective on the whole thing. And that also enables us to solve problems. So that's one way we could all unite. Just cool everything down. Just cool it down. Just let the water kind of flow over it. So like a water-cooled engine, you just want to let that water take the heat away and dissipate the heat.
Michael, a few things came up for me when you're talking about right now, just cooling it down. It's funny that we all can see and talk about and argue over global warming and the need for the globe to be physically cooled down, but not many people can see the need for temperature.
See the need for what? You're breaking up a little bit.
I said one thing that came up for me is you're talking about cooling things down, and it's kind of ironic that we can see and talk about global warming, or possibility of global warming,
Yeah.
whether or politically that we're good, but the need for the globe itself to be cooled down, but people don't seem to acknowledge the need for temperature to cool down. And if I can cool my temperature, react to then that in and of itself.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm getting the gist of what you're saying. So one thing that bothers me is every time I go to the kitchen sink, or especially the bathroom sink, and I turn on the hot water, it takes forever for the water to heat up. And it's like, why? You know? Or you flush the toilet and 5 gallons of water is just gone, you know? Or and you know, as I think all of you know, I was doing the full-time travel in my van that I fixed up as a camper. And so I had to learn about solar power and you know, put solar panels on the roof and have a battery pack in the inside the van, which meant that I had to monitor my power usage all the time. It was like just something I thought about my power levels as often as I thought about how much gas was in the gas tank. So, and I came to realize how little power I can get along with. I mean, it's amazing that how you know, and the argument usually goes something along the lines of, well, we can't do solar energy because a lot of parts of the world don't get that much sun. Well, fine. Those parts that don't have sun, they can use something else. But the parts that do get sun, imagine how much of the load they could take off the grid if they utilize solar energy to the maximum. You see? So it's this one size fits all mentality that is part of the mass mind that is one of the worst things ever. You know, life is not about one size fits all. Everybody does what is specific to them. But if the orientation is towards sustainability, then everybody's going to come up with unique solutions to that problem. You see? And that way too, you know, the critics of there's no reputable scientist these days who denies that the planet's warming. I mean, that's just a matter of fact. But what they dispute are the reasons. You see, and then you know, based on the reasons, then it's the policies that some people want to enact. That so if you, for instance, if you mandate that you know, we're going to drive less, and the way you put that policy in place is by tripling the price of gasoline, who gets hurt the most? Poor people. If you limit the use of fossil fuels, you limit the use of energy in most places in the world, and the people who suffer most will be poor people. So in effect, the strongest critics of you know, these global ideas of how to fix the problem, they say, yeah, those will work, but 1 billion people are going to die, and they'll all be poor. So it's a form of genocide to them. So we're going to save the planet by killing a large portion of our population. And the people who are doing the killing are the people who are going to be able to use as much energy as they want, as long as the poor people don't use any at all. And the only way they can do that is if they die. So that's one argument. You see, so it's a multivalent problem that has no one size fits all solution. You see, that's dumb. That's not thinking. So, and it's not spiritual, because to be in alignment with the personality of God, all people have to be able to survive and thrive. And most of us know that we can't all just be profligate in our use of energy and have that happen, right? I mean, everybody is going to have to make adjustments, but it's the way we make those adjustments that's going to make all the difference. But you cut off that creativity if you impose a one size fits all, and that's centralized control, right? That's what I mean, every society on the planet that has exercised centralized control to the maximum, totalitarian, that's what that is, because it's totalism. It means that the centralized power wants to control all aspects of your life, everything about your life. Those societies have all failed. And it's no way to live. So it's this one size fits all mentality that has to be looked at really carefully. You have to examine, and the place you have to look at it first is in yourself. What in me, where do I think that one size fits all? What in me has a totalistic orientation? How am I going to fix everything in my life? You see, with one thing, it's not going to happen. The only one thing there is God. So in God, you know, we can only see so far up, and then God becomes invisible, and you know, there's that philosophical idea we cannot know the will of God. Well, in a sense, that's true, but we know that there is a will and that it is for good. You see, that's living a life of faith. We can't see it, but we know it's there and it's for good. So as we allow that to come into us, it lights up our brains. We automatically get rid of these ideas that one size fits all, and we get more creative, and we're then become greater, more efficient at solving problems. I mean, that's the history of the world, right? We have solved amazing. Our problem solving ability is like no other species. We really know how to solve problems, but we have to have the freedom to do it. Yeah, I was self-employed for the majority of my life. I mean, the vast majority of my working years was in self-employment. But then I was recruited by a company and went to work for them, and was kind of in, you know, lower middle management. And I thought, man, this is great, because these people say they want to solve all these problems, but every time I came up with a solution to a problem, and then I figured out and came to realize that everybody else in the room already knew, because they had not been, that they were just smarter than I was, to be honest. In terms of human nature, they knew that what was going on was not about solving problems. What was going on was they wanted to regimentize and systematize everything to maximize profits, what in their minds they believed would maximize the financial viability of the company. But that was going to be, they were trying to do that in a way that was just use people as replaceable, disposable parts. That's not viable, nor is it sustainable. So it was a huge life lesson for me. And I want nothing to do with that. I'm going to be self-employed forever. And that means in my next lifetime too. So yeah, we have to allow those who are creative to come up with creative solutions. And the only way they can do that is if they're free to do it. So that means there has to be incentives in place to allow them to do it. And there has to be, we can't have some overarching controlling body dictating what people can and cannot do. I mean, you have to have watchdog for sure, because you don't want people just taking advantage of the system and doing, you know, taking it for their own purposes. But you have to ensure that everyone is free to act creatively and responsibly.
Michael, I have a question when it comes to, I know it's a big topic, but maybe you can just shed a little insight on fasting and how that works and how these types of things amplify our prayers.
Fasting?
Yeah.
Yeah, that That's a strong impulse, you know, that's part of the instinctual network in our bodies, is that and even the physiology has ways to anticipate um, famine, you know, where we build up fat in anticipation of not having food. You know all about that, right? It's yeah. So fasting, what we do when we fast is we turn up the volume on that instinctual, which is a large, like if we were an electrical system, that would be a main trunk. You know, that's one of the main power supplies, would be this urge to survive. And part of surviving is to eat, you know, so that's constantly there. So what we're doing by fasting, because we're not just the body, we have a spiritual, we're spiritual beings in a physical body. We turn up the volume on that by deciding not to eat for a period of time, and that instinctual part of us goes bananas. It's like, what? You know, I need to eat. I need to eat. And we're saying, calm down. No, you don't. But we're taking that energy then and we're shunting it over into another purpose, which is the development and the creation of our platform. Like the lightning that strikes that lightning rod on the barn, we take that energy from that desire to eat, to consume, and we redirect it into the well to clear the water. Now, I don't know about you, but when I fast, once you get through the initial fogginess, you know, where the system is trying to adjust, my mind gets really clear. And I start to, you know, then I can see my platform a lot clearer, you know. I get clear about what I'm about, because I'm taking that primal instinctual current and I'm redirecting it in the direction that I want it to go. You see? And then the clearer you become in your platform, in your purpose, in your yes and no, you know, what you will put up with and what you won't, then the clearer and more powerful your signal in Indra's net is going to be, and the more effect you're going to have on the world. So yeah, fasting is really helpful in that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was always kind of curious how it worked with the energy, but that Indra's net really helps. Thanks.
Yeah. And I think of Indra's net not as a planar surface, but as a three-dimensional grid. You know, each interstices within that grid has a jewel. And so normally, if you ask a Hindu about Indra's net, they say each jewel reflects the light, you know, that they all reflect. But I find it more helpful to think that there's one light, but it really comes from within each jewel. So that as each jewel gets more potentialized, then it's that light that it's one light, it's lighting all of the jewels simultaneously, but each jewel then opens itself in a way that enables more of that light to come through. Light, power, energy.
So this has been a really enlightening talk. However, I wonder if I think of the person we follow, Jesus, being an enlightened one, so he's going to be effective. But when you talk about us who are on a lesser level, all doing our own thing, I think this is what's creating the conflict.
Yeah. So we need an equalizer.
Yeah. So what's that?
Well, that's the highest. See, that's the thing that we can't see, but we know is there.
Right. But I don't feel I'm there. So if I'm out there doing my thing and you're out there doing your thing and it's conflicting, how do we reach you know what I mean? It all sounds wonderful, but until we're at the place where maybe some of these Buddha or Jesus is at, it's all conflict. Everybody's doing their thing.
Yeah, that's a very good point. But that's where the reality of the way it works is that we are set up in such a way that we can access the highest without understanding it. And but we have to know that. You see, and this is the primary value of meditation and prayer, is that we reach up and we accept that the highest is a reality, even though we don't know what it is. We can open up to it and let it come through, and then we get to observe how it manifests in our lives. But as long as, this is why, sometimes referred to as the people of faith, the faithful. This is what the church calls the body of Christ, because we have this vision of who and what Christ is, and we reach up to that and we allow it to come down and through us, and then we get to see what that's what revelation then becomes. That's where insight comes in. But as long as we're given over to that and we recognize it as a real thing, then we don't need to understand it. All we need to be able to do is to understand what we are cognizant of, you see. But we always leave that door open, that skylight open, so that the influx of that pure intelligence, that pure love, that pure presence and connection can come through and operate through us, and then we get to see what it is. And well, each of us will
That's
see
the
it.
cooling down, is it?
Yeah, because that's one thing I think we can all agree on. That's not stepping on anybody's toes to cool down their emotions. Right? Doesn't hurt anybody.
Would that we all did.
Yeah.
Would that we all did. Thank you.
Yes.
And just real quick, I just want to say this was a wonderful, as it usually is. And what I'm walking away from is that the way I see things, I always know we're a tool one way or another. We're either and we're either motivated by fear or love. So and some of the unscrupulous, or even people who are just in advertising, know, oh, don't grow old, don't do this, don't do that. We are bombarded with fear, but our love part knows that there's growing old is wise, and we don't have to fall victim to that. So I think that was wonderful to keep in mind. And then on the other side of thing, not on the other side, but on the two main things I'm taking away is that, and then when you're saying keep your faith, thunder perfect mind, that came to mind. I don't know if either one of you know Thunder Perfect Mind.
No,
It's a,
no, what is that?
Oh my God, it's from the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. I'll send you a link.
Oh yeah, please do.
I am it basically, I mean, I am the virgin, I am the whore, I am this, I am that, I am you, I am me, I'm the male, I am the female, I am the groom, I am the bridegroom, I am everything. And in the end of it is that I have a personal connection with God, and I don't care, like basically she's saying, I am love, and why do you hate me so? I am this, I am that, I'm this, why do you hate me so? But in the end, I'm going to speak his name, and it's going to be glorious. And I'm going to be on my pedestal. I will speak his name the way I see it, and it will be glorious and love. And I'm not doing it justice. It's beautiful. I will send it to you. But those are the two things that came to mind when you said that it just reinforced everything. That I will speak his name. Regardless, I will walk into the fire. I'm sorry, it's been a very emotional couple days speaking his name, because others have had to do that. So I can stay here and speak and use my free will and not be afraid of getting thrown into the fire or getting thrown into this or that. So sorry, but beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah,
because
one thing that occurred to me, it's been some time now, that what's specific to man is general to God, and what's general to God is specific to us. So in other words, we say love and we think that that's really general. That's kind of a general concept, and we get all wrapped up in the different kinds of love and
Yeah.
interpretations of love and all of that. But to God, love is love. It only means one thing to God. And so when we pray for love, God knows exactly what we mean by that, because God sees the
Yeah.
whole picture. But when we try to create love ourselves, then we get real specific about it, and that's why it doesn't work, because we're not open to the full range of possibility. That's really what the religious people refer to as faith. It's knowing that something is real without knowing exactly what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes our faith is tested more than others, and then, yeah, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Is.
sorry. Yes.
We each have to be responsible for our own lives. And it's by being open to the greater possibilities that our lives expand and become more creative. As long as we're not too attached to the way that we do things normally, we have to be willing to change and, change things up and to let go of things, because life is, the power that's moving through us now is so great that things are changing and more rapidly, and change necessitates letting go, because you can't be in the river and flow with the river if you're continually clinging at the banks, grabbing for branches.
Yeah.
So we have to let go, but
And
not go to
breathe.
sleep and breathe. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you both so much for everything, and for a great Saturday. And yeah, I will see you next week.
All
Thank
right.
you both.
All right.
And you have a great week.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.